Good morning and welcome to another Memphis Monday 128. Today we're going to be rebuilding a one-person boat. A friend of mine asked me if I would, the one he has was falling apart, and he wondered if I'd make him a new one. Well, I avoid boat building because it's tedious and boring and hard. And besides that, I looked at his boat that was falling apart, and I decided I couldn't build a better boat than that anyway. So why not just rebuild the old one? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be repairing or rebuilding a one-person boat. Let's go. Let's knock off the chit-chat and go over and see if we can come up with a plan. Boat building can be kind of tedious, takes a long time, so I've already started to strip out all the old stuff. This is the floor. What happened is the floor, it got water in it, and the floor delaminated from the fiberglass on the other side. This is a bait box here, and what's happened is water has gotten up through the vent holes here and gotten up under the floorboard and delaminated the fiberglass from that. This looks like wood right here, but actually this right there, see how it's moving? That is actually a layer of fiberglass that's on the bottom. Now my plan is to smooth this all out and replace this bottom and re-glue it to this fiberglass here. And additionally I'm going to plug these holes through this fiberglass. These are the vent holes that allowed water to come up into the bait box. But the problem is that water leaked underneath between the plywood and the fiberglass and delaminated the plywood from the fiberglass. Okay, the next thing I got to do is I got to figure out how to cut a piece of plywood that'll exactly fit in this space. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap a line down the center of this thing to give me a starting point. What I'm doing here is I'm making a template out of some remnant plywood here, so I can transfer the shape of the bottom of that boat onto this template. Okay, inside the boat, what I've done is I've put a mark every foot along that center line. I made a mark, and I'll transfer these measurements over to our template. And here on a template, I've duplicated those lines and the center line. And my theory is I can measure out from this center line over to the edge of the boat and give me a rough outline of the shape. Now obviously I have to take those measurements at right angles to this center line, and one of the ways to do that is to use a large wooden compass. Lay the center line on the 90 here, so now these are 90 degree. Okay, I've transferred these measurements here onto my template. Here's the template. I simply took the measurement from the center line out to the edge of the floor and then transferred it onto my template here. Okay, now the trick is to draw that curved line. Okay, this curved bottom, you want to think, well, it must be a radius. This might be the chord of a very large circle, But the problem is the radius of it, of this large cord here, would probably be bigger than my garage, and so it's not really practical to investigate whether or not this is a radius or not. Let me show you the alternate plan. The alternate plan is to take some of this edge banding here, it's real flexible, and run it right up against my marks and let it draw the curve for me. And then I can fine tune it. I can fine tune it after I cut it out. See, to make this happen, all you do is position this edge banding right where your marks are, and then put your screws in, and it makes a natural curve between those marks. Okay, I'll finish cutting this out, and then we'll go over to the boat and see what we have to trim. And I say that because I know it won't exactly fit. We're going to have to trim it. It's real close. I think I'll be able to do some trimming with the sander. Now I want this thing to fit exactly, so I'm being real gentle with it, and I'm going to actually sand it into conformance here. You can actually see those, even on the camera, you can see where there's a bump out there and a bump out here. Yeah, I got it in. Now this isn't the bottom, this is just a template for the bottom. And it's not even the whole template. We got to have 2 more sections of the template. This is what I mean, I have to make some additional templates. I only had that 6-foot sheet of a 1/4-inch plywood, and I needed 8 feet, so I had to add a couple more templates. Okay, I already drew this thing out on this exterior plywood. This is a little bit less than 1/2 inch, and it should fit in there. I got the new bottom set in place, mocked up. I guess the next step will be gluing it in place. This is AB exterior plywood, and I'm putting the A side down because I want the most consistent surface for the gluing. What I'm doing now is just sanding off, make it nice and smooth, and make sure that, you know, if there's any oil or any kind of contaminants on the wood, it won't interfere with the epoxy. Let's look at the setup here. I got the inside the floor there all sanded and vacuumed out, so there's no dust or anything. The inside of the boat there, that'll all be sanded once the sanded all at one time when the floor is put in there. I'm going to be holding the floor in with weights, toolboxes and everything, press fit the best. Another thing I had taken into account is that the main floor, the center part right there is flat, so it'll be pressed against the workbench here. But the ends, the bow and the stern, flare up at the end. So I put that little wedge in there. This is the bow of the boat. And here's the stern. I got the wedge taking up the corresponding flare down here on the stern. I brought the camera over here so you can see it. You can see how runny it is. I'm going to be mixing up quite a bit of this. So I'm going to you mix it 5-to-1. I usually use the pumps, but since we're going to be using so much epoxy, I'm mixing it up in these little containers because they're marked off. So 750 milliliters would be 150 milliliters of hardener. Well, I think I'll go get another one. Okay, first thing I'm doing is putting some of this filler in there. When you use this stuff as a glue, you need to have some filler in it. Give it some body. And I'll put 750 milliliters of resin, epoxy. And 150 milliliters of hardener. Okay, I got about 1.5 liters of that glue in there. Let's put the bottom down. See if we can do some damage. Now, you don't have to use the commercial this filler material. You can actually use real fine sawdust. This is what they use for stitch and glue boats. I got this out of my spindle sander. It's just very, 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 very fine. And so what I'm making here is kind of a peanut butter consistency to fill cracks and gaps. And I'm going to use the pump instead of the containers because I don't need as much. And the beauty of this West System stuff is the pumps are 1-to-1. So once you get them pumping, just match how many ever resin pumps to the hardener pumps. Okay, now you can see this is the stuff we just made. It's super tough. It sticks to air. It's waterproof. It's unfortunately, it's real hard to sand. Okay, what I'm doing here is I got some gaps. Fill in with this stuff. And remember, I put the A side down on this deck, so that left some knots exposed. But this is what you use to fill up knots, and not just in boat building, but if you check some videos online, you'll see that this epoxy and sawdust trick is used throughout woodworking to fill in knots. I got that little that one little triangle in there. I think it's in there pretty good. Well, what we're going to do is see all that squeeze out. That tells me all that squeeze out tells me we got some good contact underneath the good contact between the floor and the outer hull. So next step will be to do some sanding and fair the inside, and so let's let this dry for a few hours, and we'll come back and do some sanding. What I'm doing here is fairing. It's called fairing. The transition between the sides and the bottom. I specifically selected this fiberglass, or this bottom material, because it was the same thickness as that groove. What I'm doing now is taking the excess paint, loose paint off the sides, and making a perfect transition so that when this is painted, the sides will just flow right into the bottom. While I was waiting for this stuff to cure, about 3 hours, I was in working on the video, and it looks like we're gonna have to make this a two-parter, because I don't want to leave out any of the fiberglass stuff that the epoxy stuff we did, and so we're not going to be able to get it done in 2 episodes, or in 1 episode, so this is going to have to be part 1. Well, that does it for another Memphis Monday 128, rebuilding a one-man boat, part 1 of 2. I was sure I was going to get it done in 1 episode, but I really we've never talked about the epoxy before, and I want to make sure I get that in there. We've never talked about how to position a piece of wood in an opening like that, and I want to show you how that, so I don't want to leave that out. So I'll make it as short as I can, but I don't want to leave that stuff out because we never covered it before. But anyway, I think you got some takeaways. Like and favorite and Facebook and tweet and Twitter and all that stuff you do on the internet. But most important, what is it? Make sure you're back here next week for part 2 of the one-person boat rebuilding adventure. Thanks for playing along.